Namaskar everyone, and I am thankful to all of you for giving me the time. I am also aware that I am sitting because we are doing through the Zoom or WebEx, but I am the hurdle between your cake and the dinner. So I'm perfectly aware of that. I'll keep myself to the time. Few things I would like to share, just as my background, like my technical background is chemical engineering. I heard the word ONGC. I worked in oil and gas industry in North America for a good time. But my passion, or something you can think of in terms of superfluous hobby, superfluous in the sense is which is something that may not pay me, but something that I feel very fascinated, and I hope that I can share some of the things with you tonight, is my passion, my fascination for the Indian civilization, but not just Indian civilization, the world civilizations. And I'm studying them for last 25 to 30 years. So, especially in America, all the way from Alaska, all the way to Patagonia, I'm very interested in different civilizations. Actually, I have been to these places multiple times. I mean, the extreme ends of the hemispheres like Alaska and Patagonia. But as far as my published work goes, it has, to this day at least, it has focused mostly on the ancient Indian civilization. Now, why specifically the dating of it? Like, how old are the specific historical events? And many people, especially people from Indian background, will think, not everyone I'm saying, but many people think it doesn't matter much. I mean, what matters, you'll hear that, at least in the Indian circles, that what matters is the values and the morals and all that there are in the ancient Indian narratives. For example, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Rigveda, and so on. The reality is, if we want to make a sense out of the vast ancient Indian narratives, but not just the stories, not just the itihas, but all the various inventions and very creative endeavors. For example, the yoga is something that everyone relates to, but not necessarily what we see here in North America, or for that matter, even in India. The yoga is just a small fraction of what the yoga is. How many of you know the Aveda brand? Aveda. So everyone knows Aveda brand. And how many of you know that that actually stands for Ayurveda? Like the person in Minneapolis brought two Ayurveda practitioners from India. They worked with this individual for many years, and the various products that you see are essentially Ayurvedic products. If we think of agriculture, if we think of navigation, those of you, if you are in the geology, and if you think of the nautical circumference of the earth, it's given as a 21,600 nautical miles. How many of you know that that 21,600 has a direct connection with ancient Indian astronomy? Even as simple thing, and tomorrow I'm going to speak, tomorrow morning, our America time, New York time, at some place about the origin of the weekday sequence. As simple as, let's say, starting with a Saturday, just for example, okay, because today is a Saturday, I'm just saying it. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the cycle repeats. Why these? I mean, we know these are the names of the planets or the deities, but why that specific sequence? Again, you will find the roots goes back to the ingenuity and creativity of ancient Indian seers. Now, to do this, many times the confusion would come. Again, this is not an interactive session. Otherwise, I would have asked you this question, which I love to do. I was doing corporate training for a long time. But suppose if I have to ask the question like, how old is Indian civilization? Not just somebody's opinion, not just somebody's belief, but based on empirical, objectively testable scientific data. And I know what you're going to tell me, or if somebody asks you that question, say in North America, is what you have heard, or what you read in Wikipedia, or wherever you read that, or whatever you hear. And the typical answer you would hear, oh, it's like a 5,000-year-old civilization, or more than 5,000 years. That is actually, I want to tell you, it's an extremely lazy number. Okay? there is no evidence whatsoever for that 5,000 number as to why somebody should say 5,000 years old. In fact, I'm going to give you just a quick summary of my work. We just talked about, like, I heard the word Vedic and somebody chanted something from Veda. If we want to make sense of the ancient Indian civilization and try to connect with some of the basic things such as Ayurveda, agriculture, navigation. By the way, just on the point of navigation, let me ask you, if how many of you knew this? Now, this is known to many people in oceanography and geology for a long time, but the specific paper I have in mind is from Current Science that came out in 2020. This is from Professor Ramaswamy, coming from the Tamil Nadu, the southern state of India, which has now brought up the evidence for very sophisticated ports, very sophisticated navigation technology, very sophisticated navigation network, the place called Kumpuhar in Tamil Nadu, on the eastern coast of India, going back to more than 20,000 years. And as the sea level started rising, beginning with 20,000 years ago, the first port went under the water, then they built second port, then the third port, fourth port. Actually, they went through 7 different ports to what the current port is. But our situation is that we have some evidence here, another evidence here. And our situation, if we don't study this methodically, is very similar to the famous Hindu metaphor of 6 or 7 blind men trying to describe the elephant. Now, someone, you know the story, someone touches the trunk and he describes it, well, the elephant is like a pipe. The other person touches the feet of elephant and describes this as some pole, right? And just goes on and on. But if in that story, when we say 6 or 7 blind men, there is also a realization that if actually somebody can open the eyes, or some other person who can see the elephant, will able to make sense out of these pieces together. And in my humble way, this is what I tried to do over the last 25, 30 plus years. I would encourage you, I think Aparna mentioned, I'm on the YouTube. In fact, it's not unusual these days with the COVID, we wear the mask and we go out. But if I'm going to a restaurant, Indian restaurant or otherwise, I didn't realize how famous I was, But sometimes I'm just waiting for my turn to get inside the restaurant or to pick up the order, and somebody will come next to me, just walk back and forth, and then sheepishly ask me, "Are you on the YouTube? Or are you that YouTube guy?" So that's not unusual for me to hear. And I said, "Oh, YouTube guy. Okay." Then I realized I am a YouTube guy. So if you find what some of the things I'm going to share with you, definitely, and if any one of you have a sleeping problems, at night you can get on the YouTube, type my name, Nilesh Oak. You're going to get 400, 500 plus videos. You can start watching them and they're going to put you to sleep in no time. Okay, so you can certainly do that. To summarize is this, to create a dating framework, and that dating framework is like that seeing the total elephant, because then all the things such as Ayurveda and agriculture and navigation, and I'm just mentioning these 3 for a simple reason, these very well connect with our basic necessities. In the Rigveda, in fact, there is a mantra, the Rig, it says, Om Tvanno Asya Amate Rutakshudo Abhishastu Ravaspradi Tvanna Uti Tava Chitraya Diya Shiksha Shachishta Gatulita. So the 3 words there is basically the Kshuda, Abhishastu and Amati. We need wisdom, we need nutrition, sustenance, and we need good health. And that's what that Ayurveda, if you think of it, Ayurveda, agriculture and navigation refers to. Okay, or of course the wisdom in terms of different sciences. So when I started with Mahabharata. And there are professors here. How do we make a revolution, or how do we make a significant improvement in any research? Professor John Wheeler of Princeton, if you would have heard the name, the professor to Richard Feynman, the phenomenal personality. He used to say, if you want to have a blast in your life, find the toughest unsolved problem in any discipline. Toughest unsolved problem in any discipline, toughest unsolved problem in any discipline of science, and then go solve it. You may be successful in solving it, you may not be successful in solving it, but one thing is assured, you are going to have a blast in your life. Okay? On the last day, you're going to say, you know what, I lived my life. And so, just by coincidence, when I was doing my master's in engineering, chemical engineering in Canada, I had finished my thesis and I was just waiting for the thesis to be completed. I had practically nothing to do. I just happened to go to a library. Now I said, let me explore the Indian section of it. I started reading Mahabharata, trying to figure out where the Bhagavad Gita is, because I was a student of Bhagavad Gita right from my childhood because of my mother. And just trying to look for it, I came across one specific observation. I'm not going to get into those details, but that was fascinating because what that astronomy observation said, and I knew a little bit of astronomy, that is simply not possible in our times. Not only that, if you go backwards using astronomy simulations and whatnot, the NASA data, the astronomy softwares, mathematical calculations, that is something not possible, which is said in Mahabharata that this was happening at the time of Mahabharata. You can go back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years, and still it's not the case. Whatever is described in Mahabharata won't happen. That fascinated me, and being an engineer, I think I thought, like, maybe I need to spend a weekend solving this. I was extremely naive, possibly still naive. I thought I'll finish this on a weekend. It took me 15 years from 1995 to 2009 to solve this two-line problem of a Mahabharata. Like it would say, Ya Chesha Absuta Rajastrailoke Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Daya Pesha Vasishta Prishtata Kruta. The star Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. But the long story short, when I finally solved that, it actually gave me a time, going back more than 6,500 years, and said, this is the only time the Mahabharata war can happen, if that reference is correct. But I said, how can I be sure? That time I started reading Mahabharata, extracting every single possible astronomy reference I could find, because that's the process of science, right? You have to collect all the evidence, all the relevant evidence. And now just imagine, so I actually found 300 plus astronomy references. Now just imagine solving a combined puzzle that is like a crossword puzzle and a jigsaw puzzle together. That's how the problem of Mahabharata is. And it's not somebody's imagination. In fact, when Vyasa, the writer of Mahabharata, when he wrote it, he actually says it, or actually Vaishampayan, his student says that. He says, how's this Mahabharata text? And he says, Grantam Granthi Tada Chakre Munir Gudam Kutuala. It is full of curiosities, it's full of mysteries, it's full of different twists. So that's why it's a puzzle. And by luck and by grace of from the top, I would say after spending 2 more years from 2009 to 2011, I could put together these 300 specific astronomy observations together, like solving a jigsaw and a crossword puzzle. And that led me to a specific time for the year of Mahabharata war, 5561 BCE. Okay, hang on to your chairs, guys, okay? I don't want anyone to fall off. 5561 BCE, that's going back more than 7,500 years. Now, when I was in parallel studying Ramayana, studying Rigveda, and when I did Ramayana, I found again similar, very, very similar experience. Even I was surprised that Ramayana, which is like 1/5 of the size of Mahabharata, has close to 600 astronomy references. And when you put together again like solving a jigsaw and a crossword puzzle, it led me to a very specific year, and of course the time interval for events of Ramayana, to 12,209 BCE as the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha. Okay? So now, if you see there is a pattern. Now it may not be a real pattern, but I find it useful to explain to people. If you know the multiplication of 7 or 7,000, it's very easy to remember this. Okay, and I don't want you to just believe because I'm saying it. In fact, I have my many 500 plus blogs, 400 plus videos, 3 books, and I would encourage you to explore all of them to see for yourself. So in a simple fashion, we can say the key event of ancient Indian history, namely the Mahabharata first, going backwards, happened more than 7,000 years ago. The another key event, ancient historical event of Indian civilization, the Ramayana, happened more than 14,000 years ago. 12,209 BCE is like plus 2,000 is more than 14,000 years ago. One more thing I'm going to tell you and then I'll stop. I'll just quickly summarize. Very recently, which is to say 2016 or 16 or 17, Professor Balram Singh from Boston, he had seen my work on Mahabharata and Ramayana. He asked me if I had done any work on the Rigveda. Now, Rigveda is a tough nut. Okay, Mahabharata, Ramayana, many of you, if you know Hindi and if you know little bit of Sanskrit or many Indian languages, you can read and understand some portion of it. But Rigveda is a very, very different, very old, very tough. He asked me if I have done anything. Now, I have not. I was studying it. It's very tough, as I said. But I was studying river Saraswati, and that brings us to this Saraswati Sangam. And what I'm going to say is that actually, if you take Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Rigveda together, if there is anything that can do a Sangam of these three, is river Saraswati. So in 2017, beginning of 17, I started studying Saraswati. Again, I would encourage you to, in YouTube, if you are curious, to type Nilesh Oak and Saraswati, and you see my Saraswati at Sangam talk, not to confuse with Saraswati Sangam, where I have shown that not the civilization, but the existence of Saraswati, which now has disappeared, actually goes back to close to 200,000 years. And you know what? When the grand Saraswati that is described in Rigveda actually disappeared? See, Rigveda talks about the Saraswati as the grandest river. And towards the last portion of Rigveda, it talks about Sindhu as the grandest river. Everyone knows Sindhu or Indus, and now most part of it is in Pakistan. But the Saraswati that is described as Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame, Saraswati, the grandest of the grand river, the greatest of the great goddesses, and so on. Or the same Rigveda describes Saraswati, river Saraswati I am talking, as Giribhya Asamudra. That river, the grandest river, which begins in high mountains and flows all the way to the ocean. And now if we start looking at the climatology evidence, oceanography evidence, hydrology evidence, geology evidence, morphodynamics of river evidence of last 35, 40, 50 years from around the world meaning the researchers are around the world, but they have studied this northwest portion of India. And what it tells us is that the grand Saraswati actually was there for 200 plus, 1000 plus years for sure, but it was gone by 20,000 BCE. So the grandest river of Rigveda was simply not there in the last 20,000 years. Now river Saraswati was there afterwards, because river Saraswati is described in Ramayana, 12,000 BC. River Saraswati is described in Mahabharata, 7,000 years ago, which is 5561 BC. And we have now additional evidence that tells us that actually Saraswati was disappearing by the time of Mahabharata. It was still there. So if you bring it together, so the last point, if you want to simply remember, and if you can remember, then I have before your dinner begins, which is this. Simply think of as a 3-sheet anchors of Indian civilization. And just to remember simply, Mahabharata more than 7,000 years ago, Ramayana more than 14,000 years ago, and Rigveda, at least some portions of Rigveda, the oldest portions of Rigveda, definitely more than 21,000 years ago. So all you have to remember is the multiplication of the 7 or 7,000, 7,000, 14,000, 21,000. Okay, that's what it does. But what it does, it creates a template, it creates a framework for all of us to start understanding how can there be a navigation evidence going back to more than 20,000 years ago. And who was even there, going through the board. That is a surprise, not a surprise if you start understanding the ancient Indian narratives, because they all start coming together. And the last point, this may be a launch of Saraswati Sangam Foundation, and wherever that is, a number of people you are already contributing. Aparna and myself, we just went into one conversation, I can't even remember when was that. And just few minutes of conversation, we had certain things that we discussed. And the next thing is, Aparna was very generous. I mean, she saw the potential of the Pracham project that we are working on. And she came forward and just commit which is going to help us do something that Hollywood does best. Many of the things, how many, I don't know, I mean, if you can raise the hands, I'm able to say. How many of you have watched, say, the serial called Outlanders on Netflix or Prime? I don't know if you've seen it. Outlanders? Nobody? No one. Okay, all right. Think of any Hollywood movie, and to some extent Bollywood also, I will say. The way it is made, many times the things that otherwise we would consider simply unbelievable, if we see that in the Hollywood movie, we think, yeah, that's possible. Okay, so Outlander is like they go to this stone circle like Stonehenge, and actually the heroine or whoever that touches the stone and she can go to the 18th century. That's how it is. And you would say, how's that possible? But they show it in such a believable way that you can actually say, well, I don't know, but I think it's possible. Like the Interstellar movie or something like this. My point is, Indians' narratives has got so much science, so much wisdom, okay? But because it is not presented in a way that is very sophisticated, in a way that is not very appealing, therefore sometimes we might actually struggle understanding, could this be true? Is this true? And with this 10-part documentary series, in fact, I don't know what Aparna mentioned, but initially when we proposed the project, it was like a 10-minute long documentaries, 10 documentaries. Aparna came on board, and with her help and with other people, actually we could do a crowd cash, and then we could raise money that we needed and actually more. In fact, we raised more, and therefore now we are working, that's not a promise, but we are working towards actually making these documentaries longer. So instead of 10-15 minutes with the money that we have collected, we may able to actually go for 20-25 minutes. At least that's the hope, or that's the attempt. And the idea is there are 10 different subjects, and if you have a time tonight, Aparna may discuss what those high-level 10 subjects are. But the 3 subjects that I just mentioned, or say Mahabharata, Ramayana, and the deep antiquity of Indian civilization, not just limiting to Rigveda. These are 3 of those 10 subjects, and that's what we are working on. The COVID has slightly changed our plans, unfortunately, because there are no video shooting is not allowed many places, and the travel is been really restricted for many reasons. But all that is changing is just slightly the time when they would be out, because our initial goal was to bring them out right now. I mean, by August 2021. And right now it's indefinite, but I would encourage you to look forward to those. And thank you very much, all of you, for your support, the way you are supporting Saraswati Sangam Foundation. In turn, that gets contributed to things like this. And I can assure you, all the people who work for this, we work on our own things, our regular jobs, regular businesses, whatever we do. And every penny that gets contributed actually goes towards making it better. In fact, with the additional money that we could raise through this crowdfunding, we are already going to go for English and Hindi for these all films. And if all the other things fall in place and additional money, we might actually go for other multiple languages. So with that, I went 3 minutes over my time. I thank all of you. My apologies for me being between your cake and the dinner. So please enjoy the evening, and thank you very much for listening to me.